Hi, guys. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the after show. Welcome to the late show. We have some great energy today. We're talking about some of the recent auction results, some of the auctions coming up just tomorrow in a couple of hours, basically. It's all very exciting. And I want to start actually with the Cartier Crash that was just sold by this new website called Loop This. Loop This is a collaboration between two Southern California dealers, Justin Grunberg and Eric Koo. And it is basically an independent auction website where they put up quite unique watches, sometimes just collectible watches that are found aplenty in the world of vintage watches, sometimes more unique examples with some serious provenance. And a lot of times they have like themed weeks. So this time they had an entire week that focused on Cartier. And one of the important pieces in that auction was this vintage Cartier London Crash. Sometimes, as you might know, this watch is called the Dali Watch, right after that famous painting of Salvador Dali, right, of that melting watch, of that soft watch. And it's a very unique design, and it's a relatively, well, it's quite a rare watch. So here is Hypebeast, in fact, hyping up this particular auction result, which would probably help draw more attention to their website. And I think they deserve at least some of the acclaim, some of the praise, because they came up with this concept right around the time when the pandemic hit. I don't know if they had been working on it before. I don't know if it was already something they were cooking up, but it's quite impressive that this was a record set for a Cartier Crash, not by a well-known commodity such as an auction house like Christie's, like Sotheby's, or Phillips, which is the rising star, of course, in watch auctions, but by a website, and not eBay or anything, by an independent website that was basically set up quite recently by two dealers from Southern California. I think it's quite amazing. So this is how Hypebeast relates it. Online watch auction platform Loop This has set a world record for a vintage Cartier Crash, selling a 1967 example for more than $1.5 million. It started at $50 and rose to $1.5 million over the course of 7 days. A final flurry of bids in the last 20 hours, adding nearly $1 million to the price. And of course, there's the buyer's premium, which actually puts the price tag all the way up to $165. And the estimate was 800,000. This is a watch that is executed in 18 karat yellow gold. And as is the case a lot of times with a lot of the elite Cartier watches of the period, it has Jaeger LeCoultre signed caliber in it, namely the caliber 841, a hand-wound movement. The Crash, clearly inspired by Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Memory, has a number of outlandish, highly dubious origin stories, including a watch heavily damaged during a car accident. The previous record stood under $1 million, 884,972 US dollars, paid last year at Sotheby's, Geneva. Imagine, basically, they have doubled this with a website, right? Which tells you how quickly we have been shopping has already changed. I mean, you already know, of course, in those live auctions, as the one that took place just today, well, now yesterday in Geneva, for Royal Oak at 50 at Philips Geneva, or as the auctions that are taking place at Christie's, at Philips again, and at Sotheby's, at Antiquorum in Geneva, focused on watches. Of course, a lot of the bids are already put through online and directed through associates who are on the phone, who are working the phones. But this is quite fascinating, and really signals, I think, an important moment, probably just a symptom of how we shop, and how we shop for watches specifically has changed in the last few years. I just want to welcome people in the chat archive. How are you doing, man? It's so nice to see you. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. Thanks for lending an ear. Dennis K reminds everyone to upvote. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, each and every one of you. It's very important for me. Jimmy, thank you for upvoting. Good evening to you as well. Meatball, it is a lot of money, more than $1.5 million. Claude C, thank you. Thank you. I've been craving for some watch content too, and we have a lot to talk about with the Philips auction for the 50th anniversary of the Royal Oak having just finished and coming through with quite strong results, to be honest, and another few auctions coming up in Geneva as well. Logan Hall, good evening to you. So nice to see you here. All of you who have been here since the beginning of the live streams, all of you who have been here for the very first time, I'm very grateful to have you, and we will talk watches. By the way, I always have some content lined up, and we can always jump back to that. Whether you want to talk about the auctions or not, feel free to direct the conversation from the chat, but more importantly, feel free to just jump on, because the link is pinned there, and I'm going to send it out once more, and again, intermittently. So feel free to just jump on the panel and talk watches with me. GB, how's everyone? I hope you are doing well, man. Welcome. Corrado Galizia, evening, everyone. So nice to see you. GB reminds everyone who has not yet subscribed to subscribe, and who has not yet upvoted to like the stream. Thank you, GB. So that was an oddball result, especially because, of course, it ended up breaking a record, and doing that in what is a relatively unique way. And again, we are, especially during the lockdowns, in the aftermath of the pandemic, we have gotten used to shopping online. We have gotten used to ordering even the groceries online. So why should watches be different, right? I'm sure some of us who have had watch purchases during the lockdown had everything delivered straight home, and I know this is operating at a very different level in terms of the price tag. But why should that be different, right? Once there is actual trust in the dealers and in what they have been delivering now for decades, it just works because people know that they are good for their word, and that they're good for their money, and that they're good for the examples, for the watches, for the condition that they're bringing to the table. And of course, when it comes to that, Philips has been at the center of attention for the last few years. And on Friday, so earlier today for us, they had held an auction for the 50th anniversary of the Royal Oak, Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, which was, as you know, designed in 1972 and presented in Basel that year by Audemars Piguet. They have organized an auction, and apparently, altogether, they have achieved 22.3 million Swiss francs, and they sold every single watch they offered. To my knowledge, they had exactly 88 examples. I heard they tried to curate 50 examples since it was the 50th anniversary. When they realized they had much more to offer, they tried 72, but turns out they had even more than that, and they had to cap it at some point. So they ended up offering 88 very unique examples of these Royal Oaks, and we will zoom into them one by one. But here are some significant ones that they sold and that we have previewed in yesterday's session as well. Lot 8, which is what you're seeing here, the second Royal Oak ever produced, and in fact, one of the Royal Oaks that was presented in Basel in 1972 in April. A reference 5402 in steel, sold for more than 1 million Swiss francs. Lot 88. This is the watch that is said to be Karl Lagerfeld, the fashion designer's personal watch, bought in Rome, PVD coated. He has been already seen and photographed wearing this watch in photo shoots, wearing this watch over the cuff of his shirt. And this watch sold for 937,500 Swiss francs. The next one is this beautiful Royal Oak Perpetual calendar executed in platinum with a Salmon dial that also broke 1 million Swiss francs, namely 1,022,200 in platinum again with Salmon dial. And of course, one of the, I think something that really lives up to the ethos of Royal Oak, because Royal Oak at the end of the day was a luxury sports watch executed in steel, brought out by a manufacturer that was until then known for classy, thin, elegant dress watches. So it was a watch that combined the prestige of that classic elegance with the brutal modernism of industrial design. And here you have that watch, that case, combined with what is one of the most cherished grand complications, the Perpetual calendar. So it's no surprise to me that it basically sold for just slightly less than that earliest example of the Royal Oak that you can find for sale. And finally, you have another watch, which is, of course, the Royal Oak that was produced for its jubilee in 1992 for the 20th year anniversary, a reference 14802 executed in platinum. And this has what they called at the time a Tuscan dial. This is before Claudia Bacci joined Audemars Piguet for their execution of frosted gold. And you might know that she's she's an expert jeweler from Florence. And this is actually made by a similar technique, right? The Tuscan dial. It is actually a hand hammered and chiseled execution. So it's very, very delicate, very exquisite and expert work that takes a lot of time to execute. And of course, as lovely as the usual tapisserie design is, as you can see here in the Salmon dial, as you can see here in that patinated midnight blue, and again, another patinated, slightly rusty example of it in A2. Those pantograph engraved examples of the dial, of course, even those shine a little more dull compared to this Tuscan dial, which is very unique. Actually, I don't know if there are more than a handful, more than a dozen, or maybe 20 of them in this sort of execution, in platinum with a full platinum bracelet. And that's obviously also realized quite an interesting final amount in more than 800,000 Swiss francs. Dennis K says, everyday millionaires cannot afford these Royal Oaks. Well, we live at a moment in time, Dennis K, that not only everyday millionaires, but not only these Royal Oaks, but the Royal Oaks at retail too seem out of reach for most of us average punters, most of us little poor boys, as the failed middling musician tried to call me. Was he trying to insult me or poor people for whom he somehow has such a strong disdain? How miserable do you have to be to have such disdain for so many different groups of people? It's fascinating. He hates Jews, he hates poor people, he hates people who eat pizza. What else? Who else? Funny guy. Bezos, heavy hitters. And Jimmy says, so much for slowdown in the watch market, although I know these are special pieces. Yeah, we need to keep things in balance, of course, Jimmy. Again, at that level of the watch market, of course, people have different kinds of worries. And even then, Jimmy, I think in a healthier market, so to speak, in a market that had perhaps recovered from the pandemic and where we didn't have wars raging all over the world, I'm sure they could have made even bigger numbers if there were less uncertainty into markets, if there were less signs of an incoming repression. I'm sure they would have made even bigger numbers. Now we can return to one by one many different results from that Philips auction. But I also want to share with you some of the upcoming auctions as well. And I will start with this very beautiful Omega Speedmaster, who has actually been to it's a very, very special piece. And it is being sold on Saturday by Antiquorum, which has been since 1974 one of the most prestigious and important watch auctioneers in the world. This is an example that is called MIR, reference number BA 34500520035. 7 of these were made. To my knowledge, 2 of them were executed with a mounted, I should say, on a full yellow gold bracelet, whereas you have 5 examples like these, where you have the watch in yellow gold on a leather band with a matching single fold déployant clasp. And I'm guessing that most of you can already tell the story about these watches. They were actually taken to space, 7 of them, all 7 of them. And then they spent some quality time in Mir, in the International Space Station. And you can already see behind there the certification that is signed by the crew of that space station. And they were then brought back to this Earth, ran through rigorous tests, and were apparently sold to very select customers of Omega, all 7 of them. So this one tomorrow is going up for an auction in Antiquorum, Geneva, as lot 534. Oh, Jesus. Dennis K says the slowdown in the watch market is much smaller than the slowdown in the stock market. X Armani says, I agree. Jimmy calls out my amateur hour. My apologies, guys. Here is the Speedmaster Mir, one of the 7 examples, one of the 5 examples mounted on a leather band with a matching yellow gold single fold déployant clasp. There were also 2 that were mounted on a full yellow gold bracelet. This is only one of only 7 watches that were actually taken to the International Space Station Mir, spent some quality time there, came back, having been run through rigorous testing both in the space station and on Earth. They were sold to very, very important customers of Omega. And here you have one of those examples going up for sale tomorrow in Antiquorum, Geneva, as lot 534. And this is number 5 of those 7 examples. Incredible stuff, really. And you can have a very quick look here to some of the other pieces going on auction, going up for sale tomorrow in Antiquorum, and we can take a deeper dive as well in a little bit. There's a tropical Paul Newman. Of course, we saw the Daytona, what they call a Patrizzi, of course, with those aged subdial rings. We had that beautiful Patek Philippe Perpetual calendar, almost fully gem set GMT right there, Rolex GMT. And you have, I think, 15202 in rose gold, a jumbo royal oak, tropical Paul Newman. It looks very, very promising. Yes, Jimmy, thank you for warning me. That's my bad. And Dennis K, that's a great looking Omega. Every man needs a Speedy. Yes, I think so. You know, like you have to have, I feel like you have to have at least cycled through them. My tryst with Speedmaster was quite short because I had gotten it as a present for my uncle. But having asked his permission, I actually ended up wearing it for a few months before I went back to the old country. So I loved it. Apparently not enough to get one. I'm really not a chrono guy, but I feel like one day I might end up getting one of these 321s, the so-called Ed Whites in steel, if it ever becomes slightly easier to get them at retail. But yes, in gold they look very distinguished and very almost like a different watch, honestly. And I think, you know, as much as I love a good Speedmaster bracelet, I am actually a fan of the newer tapered bracelet they have, and certainly the one they have for the 321 is just exquisite. But I also think that Speedmasters look very nice on this sort of leather band as well. You know, a little padded, gives it a very distinguished but also kind of a sporty look at the same time, in steel at least. Here, it just looks very elite, honestly. Another auction that is coming up, of course, in Geneva on Saturday is the rare watches featuring the Kairos collection at Christie's. And this, you know, this auction too has some rare stuff, but there's a great deal of Rolex watches that are hard to find at retail or simply hard to get allocations for. You know, a great deal of OPs, different kinds of very desirable submariners like the discontinued Hulk, Batman, of course, the Pepsi on an Oyster, the GMT Master, Saru, you know, the jam set, bezel in white gold. You have a Platinum Day date. You have beautiful Sky Dwellers, Daytonas in all sorts of different combination of dials and metals and bracelets, you know, on Oyster Flex, on steel bracelet, on a full white gold bracelet, full pink gold, white gold on a leather band, yellow gold with Arabic numbers on a leather band. You know, of course, no auction in Geneva would be complete with having at least a few examples of a Paul Newman. But again, we have a 4-digit Explorer, that simple, beautiful, platonic ideal of a watch, basically. You have a gilt dial Submariner 5513 that looks to be in a great, honest condition, honestly, just as I like them. You have a single red Submariner, 1680, that has that beautiful original riveted bracelet, just like its no date counterpart there. You see, this is the battle of the ages, of course, 5513 or 1680. Which one is better? You have, again, a full gold bluesy who has taken a purplish hue nipple dial, what you can perhaps call a Stallone, after that famous example of it that Sly Stallone used to wear in his youth. A double red Sea Dweller, of course, estimated to sell for about 40,000 Swiss francs, but I can assure you it will sell for more than that. Small crown sub, a nipple dial root beer mounted on a full gold Jubilee bracelet. This is a great collection for, great auction, I should say, for some of the best examples of vintage and contemporary examples of contemporary models of Rolex. Dennis says, have you ever bid on a watch at these high-end online auctions? Online, yes. We have to define high-end. Look, I mean, I do spend what I consider to be an inordinate amount on watch purchases, but I don't think I will ever pay more than $35,000 to $40,000 on a single watch. So I have bid on some online auctions that these auction houses have. In addition to these seasonal auctions that they hold in cities like Geneva, Hong Kong, New York, and other places, they also have ongoing private sales. So sometimes they have some great deals of watches that run on an auction, just like that early example of the website that was running an auction on their own terms and on their own website. And you can find some great deals. So keep that in mind, right? Don't rule yourself out from these sorts of circuits. If you live in a big city where there is an active auction house, go to these auctions, even if it is just to get a catalog, even if it is to participate and put in a small bid. They usually put up these watches for exhibition in advance, so at least you will get to examine and handle some of the best examples of time-honored classics. And also, more importantly, wherever you are in the world, keep an eye on the watches department of these auction houses, be it Christie's, Sotheby's, Antiquorum, Phillips. Keep an eye on them. Sometimes there are such great deals in their private sales, and because no one pays attention to it, they can go for even slightly less than the market, and you will usually be getting a good discount. Of course, always make sure that you add, at least in your own calculation, the tax and the buyer's premium, which will apply even in those private sales. Jimmy says, you mentioned last night how you prefer pre-ceramic, specifically the steel bezel Daytona. I should clarify that I prefer pre-ceramic, period, not just about the Daytona, but with the Daytona especially, because, again, this is probably a heresy for a lot of people among Rolex enthusiasts, but I don't actually like the ceramic Daytona. I think ceramic Daytona and steel, it's just not a watch for me. Having taken a closer look, Jimmy says, I have to admit that all steel is cleaner, better looking. Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective, of course, Jimmy, but in this case, we agree, right? This is a beautiful 5-digit, for example, as is this one, the so-called Patrizi. These are the models 16520 that were produced between year 1988 and 2000. And they have one of the most time-honored and respected automatic chronograph movements in them, which is the Zenith El Primero movement. And I think I quite like the aesthetics of an all-steel Daytona. I think they're beautiful in white or black. Black has the sportier, more masculine look, perhaps, in this configuration. And white has just the classic, elegant, dressy chronograph look. And of course, the Daytona case has the perfect dimensions to make it a watch that can straddle, sporty and dressy quite easily on a full bracelet or changed out onto a nice quality strap. Meatball says pre-ceramic is lovely and sleek. Jimmy says, yes, indeed, with the Zenith movement, it's a winner. Yes, and they're only, those are only increasing. And again, I don't want to encourage anyone to spend inordinate amounts of money on anything at this particular point in time. But you know that anything Rolex that is limited production and that has been out of production by now for more than 20 years, which marks it vintage by any standard, is going to retain its value and in long term, of course, increase. So Zenith Daytona right now, that's where the good money is. That's where you want to, especially if you like it, like Jimmy does and like I do. That's a great option. There's a bimetal two-tone King Midas. Unique dials on the day dates, of course, in white gold, in yellow gold, some pre-Daytona Rolex chronograph, a vintage Breguet that's expected to go for something between 100,000 and 200,000. These are, of course, again, you see Christie's has its own trilogy there of beautiful vintage Omega Speedmasters. Look at this one, for example, right? With the broad hands, the alpha hands, the dial aged into this beautiful shade of chocolate brown. The aluminum bezel nicely, chiseled and written in time. It's something else, right? As much as I like the all black aesthetic of an Omega Speedmaster, the way these have aged, the way the dials have faded, the way the hands and the luminous material has patinated, it's just something else. It's another dimension, really. Of course, some rare Lange und Söhne watches, platinum all around here on full platinum rice grain bracelets. You have an 1815 flyback chronograph in white gold. You have a double split chronograph right there. And finally, as the very last lot. You have a pink gold limited edition, Power Reserve, Zero Reset, 25th anniversary of the collaboration between Vempe and Vempe New York specifically, and Lange und Söhne. It's quite fascinating. A very beautiful and balanced dial. I really love how those heat blued characteristic alpha hands jump out of the classically simple and elegant dial of an Lange und Söhne watch. It's really one of the best executions of dress style in modern watches, really. Same thing you can observe here on this chronograph as well. That beautiful off-white, slight cream dial, and you have those heat blued hands against it. Those alpha hands, both aesthetically very pleasing and also quite legible indeed. So that's a quick preview of the Christie's auction that is coming up this weekend as well. Sotheby's has an auction coming up in Geneva this weekend. I think theirs is on Saturday. No, theirs is also on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. And they have 140 lots. It's more of a mix in this case. A lot of interesting Pateks. The sector dial with Arabics. Annual calendar, moon phase. White gold annual calendar, 5146. Moon phase, of course. $6,000 Right, it's a two-hander, seconds on the sub-dial, set off somewhere between 4 and 5 o'clock. Then you have this relatively unorthodox date indicator on the outer track. You have a 300 sector dial retailed by Tiffany & Co. Again, very simple, quite a vintage feel, even though the watch itself is not even 20 years old, 5296, with broad leaf hands, heat blued as well. We have the 5524G, which is the so-called pilot's watch travel time. This watch actually has the same movement, if I'm not mistaken, the 324 movement, same movement as Diego's new Aquanaut, as in the 5164. Yeah, I don't know if you are listening, Diego, but once again, wear it in great health. Congratulations. That's a great acquisition. And I think it's a much more beautiful watch than this one. Same movement, but the Aquanaut 5164 I find much more attractive and much more becoming of Patek and belonging to that heritage than this watch, even though I'm sure there were some examples of a pilot's watch produced by Patek in the past. There's a Platinum 5070 from 2010. And you know, of course, in addition to sometimes having special dial configurations, the great majority of Patek watches executed in platinum, as I'm sure is this one, is set by a simple flawless diamond between the lugs at 6 o'clock. I don't think they have a picture of this one, but I'm quite sure it is the case with this too, of course. It's just that little bit more, that little mark of distinction that you get from owning a platinum Patek watch. So we have a great selection of Pateks here from mostly the first decade of the 21st century, relatively recent, but again, mostly very hard to find. You have an annual calendar in German. No, a perpetual calendar in German here in a yellow gold case. It's quite beautiful and unique from year 1986. Amazing. And apparently it has a snap-on back, which has these hieroglyphs. I really wonder who the owner was and why they chose these particular hieroglyphs to decorate the case back. It says the present 3940 features a German calendar and shows engraved hieroglyphs on the case back, which could be translated as "May you be content" or "pleased." Incredible. Incredible. And it's a 36 millimeter case, very beautiful, distinguished, has a presence of its own, of course, but very subtle. The piece is very nice. Corrado Galizia says, the diamond is only for platinum, or do other precious metal models get it too? No, the diamond is the distinction. That simple flawless diamond, it's a very small one. It's set right between those lugs at 6 o'clock. And it's exclusive to platinum. As you know, most watches that Patek produces are in various shades of gold in precious metal. Steel is rare, but platinum is even more rare. So that's a mark that's reserved only for platinum watches. But this is a very, very unique perpetual calendar that has a special engraving in Egyptian hieroglyphics and clearly, at least potentially, a custom ordered dial, which is a perpetual calendar written out in German. Right, of course, most of the difference is really made by the names for the days. Otherwise, the abbreviations, for the most part, remain the same when it comes to the months. At least the 6 months that are displayed here. But still very unique and precious, of course. This is a very beautiful watch. This is that famous 565, which is This is a wartime Calatrava, right? 1943. But of course, for a dress watch in mid 40s, it's quite large. It's a 35 millimeter watch, and that's why it's called the Grand Calatrava 565. Very rare. You have a Rolex, in all fairness, that I've never seen before. Gold alpha hands, applied Eastern Arabic numerals, shock resisting, it says Rolex Oyster Royale. Excuse my ignorance, I've never seen a Rolex model like this, or anything called a Rolex Oyster Royale, 1958. Very fascinating watch. Interesting. And this is a 32 millimeter. I mean, again, to put things in context, right? We had that Grand Calatrava 35 millimeter from 43, and you have here another dress watch from Rolex, which is significantly smaller, even though it is from a later period. I quite love, by the way, speaking of Zenith Daytonas, of course, 16523 is a great choice too. Here, of course, the two-tone is even more accentuated and embellished by a mother-of-pearl dial and the factory diamonds for the index markers, except for the quarters in Arabic. But it's quite a nice watch. You have Lemon Paul Newman, which is probably gonna break $500,000 from 1969. And there's something to be said about how beautifully gold ages over the years. That slight hue of oxidization, giving it almost this sort of rosé, pinkish hue. It's fantastic on that almost burgundy brown leather band. Very nice. You have the Tutti Frutti Yachtmaster. All the flavors of Skittles represented there. A small crown sub, James Bond, 6536. A white gold Daytona on a leather band, again with a beautiful mother of pearl dial and factory diamonds, Arabics, a double red sea dweller. A very early example of a 5513, the gilt dial. This is actually a very good example of how I sometimes disconnect from the vintage market, right? That some of the dials they call and sell under the heading of tropical dials. It drives me insane. I mean, this is just a watch that may be in otherwise, very honest, beautiful condition, great case, but it simply suffered humidity and water damage. And I'm not saying that the dial or hands need to be replaced or refinished, God forbid. But I will never understand how some of these really damaged dials actually carry certain kinds of premiums. I'll never understand that. John C, this, that. Hello this, hello that. John C, you're more than welcome. John C says, Blondie is in her PJs on Tim's channel. This watch talk is more interesting. Thank you. You are one of the 10 select people who think like that. And you are in good company for sure. And we are going through auction results and upcoming auctions, and this is an underline Submariner gilt dial. The underline, of course, comes from right here, right? As you see, there is an underline right under Oyster Perpetual. But yes, with all due respect, I can never understand why something like this almost carries a premium because it's unique. Again, I'm the last person to ask for these sorts of watches to be modernized and refinished and refurbished beyond recognition. But asking for premiums for tropical dials is just... Jimmy says, it always fascinates me. Where do they get all these examples of vintage watches? You would think there would be a finite amount, but year after year, auction houses bring more to the market. Two qualifications. They actually have a very wide network, right? First of all, the auction circuit for wristwatches has existed since mid-70s, right? A lot of the auction houses had some sort of clocks and watches department, perhaps, but it was under Osvaldo Patrizi's leadership, an Italian collector himself, that Antiquorum Geneva established their division for watches, and that's when really Christie's and Sotheby's too stepped up their game, and all the other big auction houses to really pay attention to wristwatches as collectible, auctionable, vintage objects. So they have been in this game for almost 50 years now. They have an immense international network, and every time someone calls anyone within the circuit of dealers, watchmakers, and collectors, they will call the person that they have dealt with in one of the auction houses. And a lot of the big time dealers too, people like Davide Parmigiani, people like Alessandro Ciani, people like Matthew Bain, for example, from the US. A lot of these dealers too, they have dealt with auction houses. They sell watches sometimes through auction houses, but they have built their own collections and their own inventory over the years from these auction houses. So it's a circuit, and believe me, Jimmy, a lot of these watches keep coming back, right? Some of the rarest watches keep coming back to the circuit. The same watch gets sold sometimes every season, every other season, or at least once in every 5 years. Trust me, the most desirable ones, always. But when it comes to Rolex especially, there is a lot of Rolex watches out there. Trust me, with everything that gets broken, that's taken out of the circuits by being put into a safe, being lost, at sea, being melted for precious metal, let's not forget that, right? You might I don't know if you know this character, but he's a very important collector, and himself of a jewelry and watchmaking background. Claude Sfer, the Lebanese collector, who has very good relationships with F.P. Jean, Philippe Dufort. He has collaborated with Philippe Dufort before in producing this particular run of Simplicity watches. He actually owns the F.P. Jean boutique in Beirut. Anyway, when he was a young jeweler in, I was working in the Gulf at the time, the precious metal Rolex watches were so worthless to them, or they simply didn't know how much value they held, they would just break them and melt them for their metal. Imagine. And from that background and from that lack of knowledge, he basically was educated into valuing the vintage watches and vintage Rolexes in a certain way, because some Japanese customers just came knocking at his door and tried to offer what were to him at the time exorbitant amounts of money for all these Rolex watches that he had in precious metal and in steel. But anyway, so there are a lot of watches from that era. The problem is usually condition. That's the rare one. It's becoming, every year, it's becoming harder and harder to get some of these iconic models in the best condition possible. And that's where some of the nasty tricks get into, but let's not spoil everything all at once, where people, put together watches and reproduce and refinish certain aspects. But that's a nightmare scenario. But before we get into that, so when we are speaking of very rare examples in great condition, Jimmy, a lot of times you're talking about same watches going through the circuit every other year, every few years, watches from established collections, being basically passed from one collector to another, exchanged, sometimes traded. And a lot of that happens behind the scenes, right? Not everything goes up for auction. And a lot of times, these watches are trusted to auction houses by collectors who may have bought one watch from them, and they end up wanting to move on from those watches, perhaps to another investment, perhaps simply to leave something else behind if they're retiring and they want to somehow cull down the herd. There are multiple reasons, but a lot of times it's very big time collectors selling these sorts of watches. DP says, I don't understand the tropical dial reference meaning. I don't think there's one explanation, but oftentimes, because that sort of damage is associated with the fading from exposure to sun and salt water, it is usually somehow tied down with an imagery of tropics. Don't ask me, I didn't come up with the term, but this is what I always understood, what other people made me understand. Jimmy says, wow, I didn't know that since the 70s. Great insight from you on this subject. Yeah, I know a thing or two. Louis V, what wears better on a smaller wrist, 5711 or 5167? The rubber on the 5167 may wear larger, but I'm not sure. This is a stab on our friend Diego, I think. Look, I've talked with Diego about this before. I think, hey, it just happens. I know Nautilus is the hype watch, but I just like the simplicity of the Aquanaut. My preference is for the three-hander. It's not one of my grails, but that's what I would have gone for. But all that being said and done, I think it's just a more unique watch. I always hated the um, stainless steel bracelet on the Aquanaut. I think on rubber, it's very discreet. If it's cut and sized properly, it sits really well on even a small wrist. Um, and for what it's worth, again, even though I like the simplicity and cleanliness of the dial at 5167A, I think Diego's watch 5164A, the travel time, it's more balanced. It has more of a symmetry, of course, because of the pushers on the other side of the dial. I'll just pull that up for a second, just so we have a good idea of what I'm exactly talking about. You see, of course, again, we don't. We're used to having a certain lack of balance in wristwatches, of course, because you usually have the crown on one side, right? And often at 3 o'clock. But in this case, because you have the pushers on the other side, you have a certain symmetry. And with so much else that is going on the dial, the skeletonized hand and the date indicator, and of course the 3 hands for the hours, minutes, and center seconds, I think it really helps to have these pushers for this model to balance things out. I do really like the 5167 because of the simplicity and cleanliness of the dial. And of course, if you can get something double signed, that would give it an interesting balance. But I think it's a very quirky and oddly beautiful watch to me, the Aquanaut. I always liked it much better than the Nautilus. It might be because of how many watches do you have that are like worn as an everyday beater by not one but two members of the Beatles, right? Both Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr have been photographed with this watch, and even have been photographed together wearing an Aquanaut, both of them. So I have a soft spot for this watch, even though again it's not something that I would move heaven and earth to get. It's certainly worth the list price in both of its iterations. And by the way, I know these watches are not really liked and desired too much, but there is also in the secondary market, at least, I'm gonna pull it up on Chrono 24, called Calatrava travel time, and those have a similar design, except of course they play on the Calatrava case. This is an interesting example. For example, with the Breguet numerals, I kind of like the fact that it has for the GMT, it has a hand that matches the numerals, but you also have these in a slightly sportier configuration. Like this one. Let me find it in rose gold. And there you go. Sorry, the skeletonized hand there, I think, is was hiding, so it's not a good demonstration. There you go. You can see how they had a similar movement, or similar function, I should say, similar complication on a Calatrava dial. Of course, on a Calatrava case. Of course, in this case, you have a 37 millimeter. Again, the size is not very popular in the community, I know, but you have a manual wound version of it. Again, not very desirable for most, but I kind of like how quirky these are, even if also very balanced in their own way as a piece of design. Owl, welcome back. Hey, so nice to see you. Corrado Galizia says, is the watch Diego bought available on a bracelet? I don't think so, Corrado. I think the only Aquanaut in steel that comes in bracelet is the 5167. And trust me, it's just not, you know, in every other watch, basically, I would most certainly recommend that you get it with the bracelet. But in this case, having tried it on multiple times, I would say, what if you ever get an Aquanaut, get it on a rubber band. Jimmy says, with the big fight tomorrow night, do you know of any famous boxers' watches that have come up for auction? I don't, actually, now that you put it that way. I don't. Let me check, though. I know, you know, at some point, Hublot was selling like one of a kind watch that has the aesthetics of a WBC green and gold championship belt. I know that, but yeah, there we go. We have an article for that in a blog to watch. I think it's 10 years ago, November 2012. Hublot watch auction for boxing legends. I think they sold about like 12 examples of these, each dedicated to one of their champions. Yeah, and this was kind of the design of the watch. And it's supposed to remind you of the World Boxing Council championship belt, which has, green leather and gold. You have seen Mike Tyson here, of course. Up there you have Big George, Larry Holmes, all heavyweights, really. Yeah, not my favorite, as you can imagine, the Hublots, but hey. You have a very good group, though, here. Roberto Duran, Lennox Lewis, Julio Cesar Chavez, George Foreman, Sugar Ray Leonard, Larry Holmes, Tommy Hitman Hearns. A lot of legends there in a single picture. But yeah, I'm not very familiar. Maybe someone else can comment on it. Oh, thank you for coming, guys. We have passed the 1 hour mark. I will go for about 2 more hours, feel free to jump on. I'm happy to talk more about auctions, but all of this is always better when I have an interlocutor, and we can jump from one topic to another for sure. But yes, if you have been listening and if you have been enjoying the content, if you have been learning from it, please upvote the stream, press the like button. Everything helps. Every vote counts. Spread the word, share the link on other platforms, tell your friends. I would really appreciate that. Every little bit helps me as I'm trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers. And as I'm trying to get this channel monetized. And in the meantime, if you would like to encourage me in creating new and original content, if you have been enjoying some of the content that I've been creating, both in terms of these live streams and in terms of smaller, more bite-sized videos, under 7 minutes usually, if you have been benefiting from those contents, feel free to consider PayPal contribution at lordhellespontv@gmail.com, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. So we have taken a look at some of the interesting auction results, both from the Loop This auction, which was for a Cartier Crash that sold for more than $1.5 million on this new innovative website, which is a collaboration between Eric Koo and Justin Grunberg, both Southern California based. We have gone through some of the more impressive lots in the Royal Oak at 50 auction, which was an event organized for the 50th anniversary of the model by Philips Watches in Geneva. And they sold all their lots, all 88 of them, finalizing more than 22 million Swiss francs. And we have gone through some interesting watches in the upcoming Antiquorum, Sotheby's, and Christie's auctions in Geneva as well. And I've just seen actually a very interesting watch that I didn't want to miss. It was in the Sotheby's, and I just passed through it without paying much attention to it. Now that we have talked a little bit about the connection between horology and sports, one of the watches that Sotheby's is selling in Geneva on May 10 is a special edition Daytona from year 2010. So right before the ceramic reference was introduced, more or less. It's a Netherlands edition, so it has these orange accents in the subdials, in the chronometer hands as well. Nice Arabic numbers on the dial, except for the quarters. And apparently it was executed in white gold to celebrate the success of the Dutch national team in the FIFA World Cup 2010 edition in South Africa. The Dutch Football Association apparently commissioned 30 examples of these watches. And they're saying while the Crown brand normally declines all special requests, they accepted this time to produce a special Daytona for the occasion. 15 pieces were made on a leather strap, 116519, 15 on a white gold bracelet, 116509. And this is one of those examples presented here. Each player of the national football squad and a few key staff members were granted a watch. Amazing. Amazing. Again, it makes it very unique, right? Year 2010, you have a custom Rolex watch. Very rare to find something like this from the 21st century. You have a custom watch with orange accents, which, you know, have a very sporty association anyways. But for something as meaningful as this, and, you know, the Dutch have unfortunately not won a World Cups ever. So this is a final has always been their biggest achievement. So this would be a very special watch indeed for a fan of football and especially a Dutch fan. Could be very interesting. And it looks otherwise so discreet among all these different lots that I skipped right by. Yeah, but very, very beautiful. White gold, black dial, orange accents, and a very cool and unique Daytona as a result, pre-ceramic Daytona. Fascinating. The leads, come to me, the leads. The leads. Thank you for being here, man. You're bringing my mojo. You're bringing the leads to me. I have the leads in the chat, and they are the strongest. Jimmy, orange army color on that Daytona. Very unique watch. I don't, you know, it's one of those things that I scrolled right past it, but somehow on a second take, I realized how special it was. You have a little Lange 1 soirée, so presumably a woman's watch, right? Mother of pearl dial, diamond set on the bezel, smaller size, of course. I'm guessing, you know, it's hard to make out proportions, of course, just from the photograph, but yes, I was going to say 36. Cool. Because nowadays, of course, the model they sell as little Lange is 38 and a half, if I'm not mistaken. So this is an earlier iteration, of course, from year 2010. And of course, that characteristic 3/4 plate and the immaculate finishing of the movement, as always. The swan neck balance cock right here. Very, very beautiful. Yes, we have admired before those alpha hands on the vintage Speedmaster. Of course, the broad arrows are quite striking as well. It's reference 2915. Beautiful bracelet, which is something they replicated and reiterated, reproduced in this steel 321, as you would recognize. Something they reproduced in a modern take for the modern Ed White. Amazing. Yeah, those bracelets look really, really nice on a Speedmaster. Very cool. You have a Zenith pilot's watch. I'm assuming it's a mil-spec Italian, right? The Royal Italian Air Force. Apparently. Very fascinating. And yeah, the least one can always learn from these auctions is, of course, some of these unique examples of watches that you have never seen. If you get to examine them in person, that's even better. And for the models that you're familiar with, for example, the Malt manual wind chronograph that I introduced to you in an earlier video, I will put the link down there. You have one listed here in a great example. The case looks pristine. The band looks quite new. I can't really tell from the stamp in that angle whether it's Vacheron Constantin or not. I really love these in pink gold. So as presented here, from year 2007. And just so you know, by the way, speaking of 321, this caliber is also produced from the same Lemania Eboche, from the same movement base that Lemania produced for manual chronos made by Omega, made by Patek Philippe for a long time, made by Vacheron Constantin for a long time, and made by Philippe Dufour, Roger Dubuis, until recently as well. So this is the movement base. Of course, the modern iteration of 321 was not actually built on a movement base supplied by Lemania, but it was made from scratch, modeled after the original 321, which was built up from that base. Let me send that link for you all to watch later, because that video takes a little dive into some of these Vacheron Constantin manual wind chronographs from the turn of the century, from the first decade of the 21st century, and tries to present some value propositions for you. John C says, pull it up, pull it up, pull it up. I hope I did pull up exactly what you wanted, but yes, guys, feel free to direct me from the chat. I'm happy to just pull up examples of watches that you would like, but this is really a very, very precious and distinguished example of a manual chronograph. Also, there's a reason, of course, again, that so let's see, for example, the base caliber is called caliber 2310, right? Lemania chronograph caliber 2310. And that's the movement of which the base was used by Omega until 19 68, I think, as caliber 321. That is the movement that is also known by CH27, that has been used by Patek as the base of their perpetual calendar chronos. Right, for example, for 3970. And that is also the same ébauche, same movement base that is used in this watch right here, which was the previous generation of chronographs from Vacheron Constantin. And there's a reason, of course, that these manual wind chronos are trending for half, if not less, than what Patek manual chronos from the same era are trending. And there are two reasons. Patek's designs are usually very conservative, very simple and elegant. This particular case, as you can see from both the hands and especially the talon-like lugs that splay out from the case, have a very distinct character, but I really like it, honestly. Again, Vacheron plays with the references of its own branding, right? It's called Malt, and you have, as it were, the talons of a Maltese eagle as the lugs, right? Of course, you have the Maltese cross presented on the dial, which is very nicely decorated. And honestly, I really like the aesthetics of this watch, and it has a movement that has incredible legacy of its own, and carries a very important heritage that it shares with the Moon watch, that it shares with very prestigious chronographs built out of the same base by Patek Philippe, by Roger Dubuis, by Breguet, and by others. Lemania 2310 or CH27. And you have as 222 in steel from 1980 in the jumbo size. Right, it's really incredible to see how they're trending these days. It's gotten out of control. But I do really like how how they have made the new Historique re-edition in full gold. This is probably the only Royal Oak offshore that I like, and the only one that I can actually wear on my puny wrists. But this is a triple date or triple calendar in an early execution of the Royal Oak case. You can see the rubber crown. You can see that's a stepped case. And of course, day, month, and date on the outer track. I actually kind of like it. Not a huge fan of the leather band that it comes with, but hey, if you're looking for a deal in a Royal Oak, and if you don't mind a smaller sized case, which is in this case a 38 millimeter case, it could be a great watch for someone. And you can see the estimate here. I'm pretty sure it won't go for much more than the higher ceiling they established here. And as it happens, I did a video on this too. And I've been mentioning this, and people, maybe some people think that I'm just saying as a matter of course, but I've been producing a lot of watch content silently, slowly but surely, taking my time, putting in the work. So here's a video that I did about relatively affordable options within the Royal Oak range over the years. And I'm sure some will already shoot through the stratosphere now that we have kicked off the 50th anniversary celebrations in earnest. April 15 was the 50th birthday. People have been pumping out videos and special content. Philips, of course, had its auction in Geneva just yesterday. Sotheby's has its three-legged series, Gérald Jantin Icon of Time, in I think it is in Geneva, New York, and Hong Kong. I think they have at least one more after the one in Geneva. So grab them while you can. Okay. So we are continuing to look through the Sotheby's auction coming up on May 10. And there is of course the pièce de résistance of the auction here in Sotheby's is Gérald Jantin's own Royal Oak. This is a reference 5402 Jumbo as he originally designed it, as it was originally produced. But as it happens, his personal watch is actually a stainless steel executed in a unique two-tone combination, which leaves the stainless steel bracelet as it is, leaves the crown as it is, and just simply has a yellow gold octagonal bezel. And it may well be one of a kind. It's a C series from 1978. And it doesn't only have that personal provenance and celebrity stardust that comes from Jantin himself, but also the possibility of being a unique example, pièce unique, as the French call it. And of course, Sotheby's is nice and smart enough to present it as lot 1972, as the year has it, of course. Lot 72 from the May 10 auction. Janta's personal Royal Oak Jumbo as he designed it, and as he chose to combine it with yellow gold bracelet. Sorry, yellow gold octagonal bezel. Jake Brooks says, unique how it has the date function on the rejo. Well, what do you mean? That am I missing something? Can you clarify, Jake? I think the date is placed as it usually is in any other example of the first reference of Royal Oaks, but maybe I'm missing something, because sometimes I can get lost. You meant this one? The date is at 3 o'clock. What did I miss? Is it perhaps just the angle and reflection that's giving the wrong impression? Or am I genuinely missing something? Anyway, not to get lost in the sauce, this is already estimated to go between 300,000 to 500,000 Swiss francs, and I'm guessing as they have snapped up some of the personal design sketches of Gérard Janta for Royal Oak, Audemars Piguet itself could be one of the bidders, and I don't know if it will go in the millions, but I think it will probably break 1 million Swiss francs, as the A2 just did in the Philips auction, for example, the second Royal Oak to be ever produced in serial production. Date on the reho, I still don't get it, unfortunately. If you want to jump on sometime, somehow, and help me out here, I'll be more than happy. Jump on the panel. Of course, they have again an early example of a Royal Oak in yellow gold. They have one in A series, so some of the very first watches produced in this model. They have some that are in those, thin stick hands with factory diamonds on the dial. And they have some paintings of Gérard Janta, one that in fact blends in the iconic octagonal bezel of the Royal Oak. Another one that basically includes half of a Nautilus. Of course, the selection includes some early, first production, first reference of Nautiluses in 3700, mid-sized 3800, mid-sized by retailed by the famous Swiss jeweler Güblin. the famous Safari dial, Royal Oak. Again, different configurations of the mid-sized reference of Nautilus 3800. That was basically the transition between 3700, the original reference, and 5711, which became the hype watch. They have the most recent reference of Royal Oak right before the 16202 that was just introduced this year. They have one of the mid-sized Royal Oaks in 14790. The Pontiff had one of these, as you might remember, in stainless steel and in the classic midnight blue tapestry dial. This is a very unique color. It's not very common at all to find dials in these sorts of colors. It's not very common at all, actually, to find dials that are in anything other than blue or sometimes white, depending on the year of production and reference number. So it's very, very unique. Oh. Sorry about that. They have a 5712 with a Geneva seal movement, meaning it's from 2006, because I think Patek switched to their own seal in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. Someone can correct me in the chat. So very interesting examples of Royal Oaks and Nautiluses, of course, two 70s designs with which Gérard Janta made his mark in the current world of watches, and also really put this figure of the watch designer on the map. Are there any affordable watches in these auctions? Yeah, I just showed you the triple date Royal Oak offshore. It was gonna go basically $15,000. But I mean, again, I'm not saying that's necessarily cheap. But compared to all those historically significant watches and other items with very important provenance, that this seems like okay. Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, Jake's. I'm so sorry. I got just confused. You know, this is a 90s, I think 98 offshore, and as you know, that dial design which curves inside with that reho is very part and parcel of the Royal Oak offshore design. And in this early example of a triple calendar, which is not something that they did very often in these cases, they did put those dates on the outer track and on the reho specifically because it's that extra step in the dial. Absolutely. Yes, I know you were frustrated by the end there, Jake, but finally I got it, and with Corrado's help too, because he was saying, are there any affordable watches in these auctions? And that's as affordable as it gets, unfortunately. Yes, my bad there, man. All right. So let's check the antiquorum auction, because we didn't really take a deep dive on it, except to marvel at that very special Mir Speedmaster that spent some quality time in the International Space Station and came back to be sold as one of the only 7 examples and one of the only 5 yellow gold Speedmasters like that were put on a leather band with a matching deployant buckle in a single fold. So this is some of the watches that they're selling. Antiquorum usually in their seasonal sales has a very wide variety of watches. They have a Lange und Söhne chronometer, for example, that has a current bid of 550 Swiss francs with a little more than 2 days to go. They have like a desk perpetual calendar made by Audemars Piguet that has an estimate that tops off at 2,400 US dollars. Look at that. Fascinating. Some Audemars Piguet thin dress watches in manual wind, right? An estimate that tops off at 2,200. Of course, you're talking about the dress watch that is merely 31 millimeter. You have an unusual one, again, topping off at 2,400. Various Breitlings there. This is probably an interesting auction that could be quite attractive to the average punter. To people like us, guys, we can bid on these watches. You have a vintage quartz two-tone Santos with a moon phase. A lot of interesting Cartier watches there. Again, chronometers, desk clocks, watches from well-known and lesser-known brands. But something to basically appeal to just about anyone. Another fascinating desk clock with a guilloche enamel dial. And this is the Antiquorum Geneva. We have white gold Girard Perregaux, vintage 1945 rectangular watch that has a starting price of 2,000 francs. we have Glashütte from 1890. I'm pretty sure they're trying to say 1980. So from the East German unionized the manufacturers that were basically taken over by the German Democratic Republic in East Germany, in the town of Glashütte. But you can see these sorts of titles sometimes. Jimmy, earlier you were asking property of a Canadian collector, it says, for example, right? So a lot of times, a lot of collectors consign a number of different watches because they want to get out of them. They want to move on from them. Maybe they want to roll them into something else themselves. So some watches keep coming back simply in the same circuit, sold a lot of times by the same house over and over again. Porsche design, IWC, they're PVD coated. A lot of vintage and earlier Jaeger-LeCoultre Wristwatches. So Antiquorum is probably the place where you can find a lot of those deals, and you can actually register online to bid. Right there, even as you see, differently from some of the other auction houses that we were checking out, there are even lots in these, right? You have a pair of two Le Phare chronographs, for example. You have a 2-register chronograph and a triple date chronograph in a cushion-like case that is sold as a set. So you have quite a different appeal for a lot of these lots. Again, there's going to be one or two that's going to realize a very high price, and that's going to hit a very high mark. But that being said, there are going to be very unique examples of watches that are, pardon me, assessed and graded by them very properly, and that you can get for quite a decent deal. Always remember, of course, that these watches are going to come to you from Geneva with the appropriate taxes and dues and fees slapped on them. And whatever rate it finishes at, you'll also have 10, 15, sometimes 20% of a buyer's premium tagged onto it. So keep that in mind if and when you register to bid in auctions like this. It's a little different than eBay, which usually, of course, that sort of fee is reflected on the side of the seller for the most part. Of course, a lot of Movado chronographs that we have talked about before from the 40s, 50s, 60s. Very interesting examples. A two-tone Speedmaster from circa 1990 on a leather band. Quite interesting. With the hippocampus on the back. And of course, that's a reduced case, automatic movement, if I'm not mistaken. It is what it is. A very rectangular, a very interesting rectangular Omega gold watch from 1930s. A mid-sized quartz mid-90s Seamaster. And that's one of the reasons I really like Antiquorum, because again, they offer such a wide variety of watches, from the most rare to something that would be available widely and elsewhere as well, but just very carefully chosen, curated, and assessed, where you can make an informed purchase with the peace of mind, with the warranty, and with the assurances that only an auction house of this level can give you. So it's a little bit better than just dealing with any random dealer that you may have chanced upon online or in, on some social media. Another interesting thing, of course, again, they sometimes sell parts, right? They sell accessories, boxes. So this is really the auction house that serves the watch enthusiasts, right? Not just the high rollers. Full on John, welcome back. How are you? So nice to see you. Jake Brooks says, you see IWC Porsche there, but several Ferrari with GP. Interesting who the car brands pair up with. Yeah, I think IWC Porsche Design was an alliance that was forged at Günther Blümlein's time. I am assuming that at that time, they basically, IWC and Jaeger LeCoultre was owned by this group called Les Manufactures Horlogères. And they were in turn owned by a larger group. I'm trying to remember what they were called. Okay, VDO Schindling. And VDO Schindling apparently was a manufacturer of automotive instruments. So I'm trying to figure out, I know they were later bought by another German brand called Mannesmann, but I'm just trying to understand if they're related to Porsche in one way or another. But no, I think ultimately VDO is perhaps related to Continental, which is like a German, another German automotive brand, known for their brakes and tires and other parts. they might have among their customers Porsche anyways, but not sure if that helped in any way to establish a connection. Yeah, all that being said, I don't exactly know. You see again, blue Oyster date dial that they're selling separately in this upcoming Geneva auction by Anticora. A gray Datejust dial, a blue Datejust dial, a travel watch by Rolex with Breguet hands and Arabic numbers in a very unique and somewhat whimsical font. Very cool. I mean, you know, they offer a lot of different sorts of lots, like various promotional material by Rolex that they just put together. A Patek Philippe travel bag. Very interesting. Yes. Interesting link to rummage through, and I'm just gonna send it right here for you guys so you can take a look there. I'm gonna pull up Lewis Hamilton doubling up on his IWC watches just recently when they were introducing their new watch. Let's see, new IWC. Up to this watch, and let's see if it's kind of I guess you can say it's it is the hype color. Of course, to be fair, Mercedes AMG Petronas team does use this hype color themselves in their livery, if I'm not mistaken. So fair play, and it's somehow reflected on the dial as well. It's not just an element of stitching or of a rubber band. And I remember seeing somehow Lewis Hamilton wearing this, Lewis Hamilton wearing the new Mercedes IWC watch and somehow doubling it with, there we go. I found it in Rub Report. Basically, watch. And in this case, of course, he was at least combining two different time zones. You can see there. I didn't really follow the press conference, so I don't know what time zones he was really tracking there. But it's a cool look that you would remember from certain historical characters like Fidel Castro, for example, wearing double Rolex in Moscow. Right, basically his date as well as as well as his GMT with the bakelite bezel insert, which is a 6542. Guys, we have just passed the 2-hour mark. So if you have been enjoying this content, if you have been learning from it, please don't forget to upvote, hit that like button, watch my other videos, spread the word, share the link. It's really, it helps a great deal as I try to reach 1,000 subscribers. In either case, if you want to encourage me, if you want to support me in my efforts to make it here on YouTube and to bring you new content, to bring you original content, to bring you different kinds of content, to help me buy equipment and start filming outside as well, consider making a PayPal contribution at lordhellespontv@gmail.com. That's lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, $LHVVV, $LHVVV. That being said, I'm going to take a very short break. What I will do is I'm going to actually leave you with a video that I did on Jaeger-LeCoultre recently. And I hope you will like it. And if you do, tell me, because I am spending more and more time to put together videos like that, to serve you better and to create different kinds of content for you that goes beyond these live streams, that you can consume on different occasions, that you can learn from at your own pace, on your own time, and that are quite short. So I'll leave you with this for the next 6 minutes. At the 30th anniversary of their master control, Jaeger-LeCoultre released 2 limited edition watches, a new master control calendar and a new master control date. To make better sense of these new releases, let us situate them in relation to the brand's 90s revival and in terms of the part JLC played in the movement for the democratization of complications. With the Reverso currently taking up more than half of the Jaeger-LeCoultre's annual production, it may be difficult to believe that the model had fallen out of the brand's range after World War II, save for a brief period in the 1960s. When LMH, Les Manufactures Horlogères, tasked Günther Blümlein with reinvigorating the Grande Maison, he homed in on the watch with the rectangular case and a swiveling mechanism to carve out a distinctive identity for JLC. For Blümlein, however, this was much more than an aesthetic vision to revive a quaint icon of the Art Deco era. Armed with the immediate experience of reorganizing IWC and his collaboration with Kurt Klaus in developing an in-house Perpetual calendar module, together with the brand CEO Henri-Jean Belmont and the French designer Yannick Delechkiewicz, Günther Blümlein reimagined the Reverso for the 21st century, where the rectangular case became the canvas for the watchmaker's watchmaker to illustrate the highest levels of Swiss watchmaking to come out of Vallée du Choux. At the heels of the Reverso 60e, the 60th anniversary model in 1991, crafted in pink gold with a power reserve indicator and a date hand, a series of complications followed. The brand's first tourbillon in 1993, their first minute repeater in 1994, their first retrograde chronograph in 1996, and their first perpetual calendar in 2000. The execution of prestige complications and innovative movement designs, including the ultra-thin movements that proudly belong to the manufacturer's heritage, remain a time-honored tradition for the Reverso anniversary models, only ennobled further by the added challenges of producing properly sized and shaped movements for the rectangular case. Just as important to Blumlein's vision for Jaeger-LeCoultre was the Master Control series, the brand's ode to simple and efficient design, as well as their dedication to fine watchmaking. Indeed, the name refers to JLC's practice of 6-week or 1,000-hour-long internal tests that assure standards of precision, accuracy, and reliability that far exceed official chronometer certification programs. These standards were introduced with the eponymous line in 1992 under Blumlein's guidance and later extended to the entirety of the brand's production. What better place, you may ask, to introduce prestige price point accessible to the widest possible group of enthusiasts? If such prestige complications are otherwise associated with the so-called Holy Trinity of Swiss high horology and crafted out in precious metals, Jaeger-LeCoultre, true to the ideals of the democratization of complications propagated by Günther Blumlein, offers the customer a value proposition executed in stainless steel. With that in mind, a celebration for the 30th anniversary of Master Control in stainless steel and with shades of eye-catching blue on the dial seems more than appropriate. Whether you go with the triple date and moon phase complication of the Master Control calendar, priced at $13,100 US, or the simple and classical elegance of the Master Control date at $8,700 US, you will not be disappointed. The real value proposition, of course, remains the earlier iterations of the Master Control line on the secondary market. Hey guys, thank you for giving me that short break. Feel free to jump on the panel if you would like. I'm gonna continue a little bit more, a little while longer, and pull up some of the style pics that I have on my Instagram, which is more and more watch related as days go by. This is a movie poster that I really, really like because of its whimsy, because of how much I like Robert Redford, of course. I also love this movie that's called The Candidate. It's from the 70s. And on his wrist, you can barely make out the red writing of the 4-digit Submariner. He's actually wearing 1680. We have Robert Redford wearing a nice simple denim shirt, combining it with classically sized Datejust with the so-called Buckley dial, which is named after the watchmaker and dealer Jason Buckley. These printed Roman numerals on Datejust and day-date dials. I think it looks really nice. Quite, simple and elegant, but also a little sporty at the same time, at least in this combination. We have Carlo Ancelotti celebrating with the players their 35th league title. They have also just made it to the Champions League final, as you might know. And in the background, David Alaba, Austrian player who used to play for Bayern and who now plays for Real Madrid, is actually wearing the rose gold, the pink gold version of the Aquanaut travel time 5164R in this case, that Diego just got in steel. This is Enzo Carra, an Italian journalist and politician, who is wearing what I think is an all-black 5-digit GMT, but I couldn't be quite sure. It's a GMT Master 2 for sure, but I can't quite tell the bezel insert there. This is Claudio Ranieri, again an Italian coach who actually won the Premier League with Leicester City, of all teams, who's wearing a vintage Daytona there with a silver dial. A 6241, as much as I can see from here. We have AC Milan legend in earnest. We were just talking about the pre-ceramic Daytonas and their appeal. I think here with the steel bezel and the white dial, it really fits. It has a lot of presence without stealing the show. Same watch, more or less. With Antonio Conte, of course, the current coach of Tottenham's Hotspur, but that was when he signed for Inter Milan in 2019. This is Paolo Fonseca. He used to be a defender, a Portuguese coach who was at the helm of Roma until quite recently, and he's wearing a pink gold Daytona, ceramic Daytona on Oyster flags. Hi, fries with mayo. You made it to Geneva. Well, I'm hoping you're settling in. We're looking at some athletes and coaches and political figures wearing luxury watches, more or less mostly Rolex. J617, a bit off topic. Have you had any issues with your 16710, like wiggle on the stem or GMT hand? Keep up the great work. No, I'm loving it, and as it happens, Jay, as you just asked, I happen to be wearing it on a nice little textured Maltese blue strap, which really goes with the Coke bezel, if you ask me, especially in the way it faded. I'm loving it. I haven't experienced the problem, but it was recently serviced, basically, not Rolex service, clearly, but yeah, no issues. Jake Brooks says, most improbable champion ever. Yeah, Leicester it was really unexpected. And I mean, I support Spurs in the Premier League, and I was really frustrated that season. I think if there was one season where Spurs should have won something, it was that. But Leicester were just unbreakable. Vardy is a very special striker, of course, but Kasper Schmeichel had a great season, of course. N'Golo Kante was with them at that time. It's a very special player. Anyway, let's not open these old wounds. This is Vincenzo Montella. He's wearing a Batgirl, a modern GMT Master 2. This is the altogether legend, John Goldberger, or Aro Montanari, as his government name has it. And he is wearing his platinum tank here on a full bracelet. Beautiful. As you might know, he has one of the most impressive collection of Cartier tanks known to man, especially Cartier tank Centrés, which are those that have a very curved case and wrap around the wrist in quite a unique way. They have quite a presence. This is Maurizio Sarri, who actually also managed in the Premier League, although less successfully than Conte and even Ranieri, it must be said. I think he was just at the helm of Chelsea for one season, but he's clearly one of the best in terms of his taste in vintage Rolex. It's a pre-Daytona chronograph. Quite amazing, really. I think it's a 6238, but I couldn't be sure. Again, it's not a very high quality picture. This is Mr. Pioli, and he's a big 5-digit GMT Master guy. I think maybe it's a 4-digit, actually. I can't quite tell. There should be another picture. If he's wearing the same watch. I had this earlier. Yeah, I think it's actually, it's possibly a 4-digit. Though again, I'm not sure. It can be 16750 as well, rather than 1675. But anyways, it's a nice look. And his assistant back there has a Rolex Submariner as well. And again, this is Claudio Ranieri, and this time he's wearing 1655, 1655, the Freccione, Steve McQueen, whatever you want to call it. But this guy clearly knows his vintage Rolex. Fries with Mayo says 4-digit GMT Master rocks 1675. Absolutely. J617 says Italians with their Rolex and linen look. Ooh, they ooze cool style. I think so, at least. I think that Sarri picture with the pre-Daytona chrono and worn in Polo Ralph Lauren shirts, with garment bag in hand, it's cool. I would probably wear smaller sunglasses, but hey, that's Maurizio Sarri. It's Il Comandante. He's a philosopher of the game. He can get away with it. This is the world champion, Fabio Cannavaro. I think he's managing now in China, possibly. I'm not even sure what he does, but he surely knows his watches and enjoys them. You can see he's wearing a Nautilus chronograph in steel, 5980A. That was for a long while the hottest Nautilus in the range. I don't know how things are now. But again, very cool. Not my favorite, but cool watch. This is a look I like a little better. Pirlo, when he was still playing, and he's in a national team camp, and he's wearing white gold Patek World Time with a Clausenet dial. It's amazing. By the way, I'm guessing it's white gold, you know, and I can't make out the dial because the dials, the Clausenet painting on the dial can tell you what kind of metal it is usually, but it might be even the platinum. I can't quite tell. And you have, again, one of the legends, Giovanni Trapattoni, with basically the same vintage Daytona with a silver dial that we saw on Ranieri's wrist. Vintage Daytona is indeed very popular. 5712, no, 5712 is the asymmetric dial. 5712 is this. So off-center seconds on the subdial, power reserve, date, moon phase. Whereas he was wearing, I will go right back to that photo as well. He was wearing this. And I'm sure you will recognize it when you see it again because of the partner. Very peculiar, but also quite unique configuration of the chronograph. You see? Like there's nothing else there on the dial. It's very much centered right there. So I believe it's a Nautilus chronograph, but of course you're free to feel in another way. This is another style icon, and this time we certainly have a 4-digit 1675 Pepsi Gmt. He's Luca Cordero di Montezemolo, and at that time he was the Ferrari CEO, of course, and he was a very common, usual sighting in the pit. This is Pioli again with his GMT master. Fry says Roman Abramovich wears a 100-pound plastic piece. His former employees wear Patek. Hey, look, I mean, Abramovich has like, you know, Brown House steps from Central Park. He can wear whatever he wants. If he wants, he can probably run naked on the streets and get away with it. Us regular punters have a hard time, so we have to flex in some way. Hopefully not too extravagantly. J617 says, I think Warren Buffett wear a long jeans. I love this pronunciation, by the way, of long jeans. It's one of my favorite. After Glashut, long jeans. What else do I like? Paddock is another one that I really like. 6241 perhaps on the Daytona. Yeah, that's what I thought for the silver dial vintage reference, right? That's what I thought in both cases, Jay. But thanks for confirming my suspicions. And this is again Cannavaro, this time from when he was playing. And it really seems like he's wearing a Newman there. Again, it's not the best quality photo. Instagram makes it even worse. But from all I examined, um, that's what it looks like. And he has that kind of collection, you know. So, and he's a chronograph guy. It just made sense. I'm pretty sure it is a Daytona, but the reflection doesn't help, even though it does look like the exotic dial Paul Newman. This was a special edition produced to commemorate AC Milan's 7th European Cup in 2007. So it has the badge of the club on the dial at 3 o'clock. It is the 114270. And it also has some special engravings on the back: 7th European Cup, 5th European Super Cup, and the first FIFA World Cup. And it says AC Milan here, 1 out of 50, I think, produced. And this was apparently a Submariner produced upon the captain Paolo Maldini's retirement in 2009, a 14060M. It has his number 3, his iconic number 3, on, you know, inscribed on the Oyster bracelet. And it has Grazie di tutto, Paolo Maldini, and 100 examples produced. And there you go. From year 2008, he's wearing a similar Submariner at the time, and you can make it out, you know, from the kind of bezel and the lack of cyclops, that it is probably also a 14060. He's now the technical director of the club, quite a legend. You know, he has, I think between the two of them, his father and him, I think they were there like 5 out of 7 times or 6 out of 7 times of the 7 European Cups that Milan won. And basically 5 of them were raised by them because they were captains as well. So this is Paolo Panerai, who is, of course, wearing a Rolex. Another rich Italian guy wearing a Daytona, vintage Daytona, no big deal. Jay says, do they have 4- and 5-digit vending machines of Rolex in Italy? It seems like they have a never-ending supply. Yeah, Italians have cornered the market, man, and they cornered it at the right time. So it's I keep saying this, but yeah, my joke about it is like, you know, whenever a baby is born, you know, in the hospital, they put a plastic bracelet, you know, baby last name. And Italy, they must be basically strapping on a Rolex on your wrist the minute you are brought out of your mother's womb. It's quite incredible, like Jay said. And this is a young Giovanni Agnelli, not the Gianni Agnelli that most people know, but his nephew, who died pretty young before he could take over. He was fated to take over after Gianni Agnelli, but he passed away. And here he's wearing a GMT on his right hand. I thought it was quite cool and funny because I chanced upon this picture right around the time that Rolex came out with the LHD. So I thought it was interesting that we had this example of Destro, a GMT master made for, made to be worn on the left wrist, of course, but worn here on the right. And this, it's just a fascinating picture to me. This is the famous German photographer Günter Sachs, and the famous German playboy, I should say, and the Opel family heir, who was at one point married to Brigitte Bardot, possibly around the time this picture was taken. And here he's examining a painting by Fautrier, and it's so immaculately set, almost staged, that it could be a Rolex advertisement from the era, right? As it says, if you were casually examining a Fautrier in an art gallery tomorrow, you'd be wearing a Rolex. So you see, he's wearing his Submariner, and a very nice dégagé look there, wearing his shirt cuffs unbuttoned under that blazer. Cool guy. This is the Jaragenta personal 5402 being sold on May 10, I think it's May 10, by Sotheby's. The steel with the yellow gold octagonal bezel. Fries with Mayo says, saw very rare single subcounter Speedy 321 and Yachtmaster from the 1960s. Well, you're in Geneva now, Fries. You should be bringing us more examples like that, at least in terms of sightings, of course. I know you like being very subtle and discreet yourself, but I'm sure you will encounter a lot of interesting watches there. Bosser says, I like vintage subs with the dainty folded clasps. Yeah, that's my favorite. That is my favorite. I do wear it on a rivet bracelet quite often, but I did have that bracelet stored with Michael Young in Hong Kong, so I have some additional trust in it. But again, there's so many stories of those Submariners being lost at sea, worn in a bracelet like that. So it makes me sad sometimes. But to wear it on the street, if you're careful enough, it should be fine. Let's see if I have any other interesting watches. I have, of course, my current avatar, Gilo Tremonti, who is wearing a Submariner. He used to be the Minister of Economy and Finance under Silvio Berlusconi. We have another photo of Luca Cordero de Montezemolo from the Ferrari pit. Again, just an Oxford shirt and his GMT master. Khakis, simple. We have, of course, one of the early examples in film of the so-called boyfriend look, Honor Blackman as Pussy Galore, wearing that dress shirt with cufflinks and the GMT Master 6542 bakelite bezel, riveted bracelet. Just an excellent watch, great look. Steve McQueen, of course, an icon with his 4-digit Submariner and a simple pocket T. There's a reason that the guy is king of cool. Let's see if I have any other. There's an old polo ad. You know, kind of an interesting way of dressing down a double-breasted suit in like dove gray flannel, and of course, you know, a very smart casual look. Of course, finally, it has Rolex Professional or Rolex Sports Watch there. Can't quite make out what it is, but that's a Rolex. The Oyster bracelet is just unmistakable when it comes down to it. Here's another one. This is Baron Montagu wearing his black Gmt Master. Very nice 5-digit Rolex. Good choice, safe choice. I think looks great on him. This is Prince Charles wearing Parmigiani Fleurier, actually, a toric chronograph. I think it's in full gold, of course, but I thought it was rose gold. Didn't take a note of it then. Yeah, I'm trying to see if, of course, we have Sir Roger Moore there, coolly smoking a cigarette. And he's right right in front of some royal insignia. We have a nice two-tone date just there with a beautiful blue dial. Just barely peeking out of what you know, what seems to be very nice and loose doubled cuffs. We have another cool guy, the epitome of British cool this time, Sir Michael Caine, wearing the distinctive Oyster quartz 19018, the Oyster quartz day date with the integrated take on the President bracelet. Goes quite well with that nice fat cigar and a glass of white wine. It doesn't hurt when you have a nice little, you know, Hockney swimming pool painting behind. As you know, that watch was just recently sold at the Bonhams auction in London. I think it was in March, and it made it itself realized the record for a quartz Rolex watch, which was at 165,000. if I'm not mistaken. I expect that to slowly pull up the prices of Oyster quartz day dates, which have been trending upwards at any rate for some time now. We have the Prince Michael of Kent, wearing that two-tone mid-sized Royal Oak 14790, which, as you see, doesn't look so bad and so small. This is, I mean, Prince Michael of Kent is quite a big guy, tall at least. And here he is in a full, double-breasted suit, and with his famous and, to my, in my humble opinion, god-awful, bulbous, onion-sized tie knot. But even with all that, it doesn't look so bad and so out of proportion. In fact, I really do like that mid-sized case that's on paper 36 millimeter for the Royal Oak. So could be an interesting choice. Yes. So we are in the last stretch. The bracelet magician. Yes, that is Michael Young of Hong Kong, guys. It's he takes a lot of time. I'm sure the pandemic didn't help with the lead times of bracelet repairs. But if you have a vintage Rolex bracelet that's stretched out of shape and really, really jingly jangly, so to speak, Michael Young is a great option. Write them an email. They'll send you an estimate. And they process everything very quickly, but the actual work with the increased lead times takes, at least like 2 months. So you have to have a lot of time. You have to forget about it for a little bit. It's not prohibitively expensive, at least it wasn't when I took care of mine, my riveted bracelet for the Submariner some years back. But yes, it's he provides great service. Marlon Brando's 16750 on the Tropic strap is really cool, almost better without the bezel. Yes, let's pull that up. That's a great little watch for. I think it's really amazing to me because the story behind it is this, right? Apparently someone on the set told him, and the gal on this guy, that his watch was really recognizable and it might somehow steal the show, right? Which to which Marlon Brando of course responded in his own way, but somehow also found something of a compromise in removing the bezel of the watch, which stripped it down to this minimalist and quite brutal, naked, raw look, combined with that rubber band that has that texture, I guess, designed to resemble lizard skin. I think it makes for a very unique watch. And this is actually the watch he wore there, patinated accordingly, as you can see. And what I do want to say about this watch, which also sold recently, it was engraved by Marlon Brando himself on the back, as you can see. And in a way, whatever the actual story is, right, about this very unique 4-digit Rolex GMT Master 1675 sold by Philips some years back, to me, it actually reflects really the mindset, the psychic world the psychology of the character of Colonel Kurtz. Because, as you know, Kurtz was more or less lost in that murky sauce of colonialism, right? Somehow went into the, well, realized somehow the darkest, most inner and sinister intentions, most genocidal intentions of colonial ideology in Conrad's original story. That was Kurtz. Exterminate all the brutes, right? The kind of scribbling he did on the margins of the journals he kept for himself. And I liken the way that Marlon Brando himself scribbled his name on the case back to Kurtz's journals, and the absence of the bezel insert I liken to his disjunction, his disconnection from GMT, from the Imperial Center, because at some point he was simply focused on his own mission, on his own understanding of what he should be doing in the colony and how he should execute his own plan, whether it's actually aligned with the visions and with the aspirations of his masters. So I think this actually, however it came about, right, this particular raw, brutal, naked GMT watch that Marlon Brando wore in Apocalypse Now, which is a film adaptation of, loose film adaptation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, I think it somehow makes a lot of sense. It somehow fits. No, that wasn't a Texan if we are talking about Sir Michael Caine. Jay, that was an Oyster quartz. It could have been perhaps difficult to tell from the photographs, not really, but since it was just sold and worn personally and in movies by Sir Michael Caine, it was pretty easy to figure out. Marlon wore a Seamaster 165014 before the Apocalypse Now GMT. Yeah, I'm sure he wore a lot of other watches as well. Aussie Expat says, charmingly engraved like a fucking dog. Aussie, you don't insult the best actor of all time like that. Speaking of which, by the way, as you might know, Marlon Brando acted as a mentor to Johnny Depp when he was still making it in Hollywood and when Marlon Brando was still alive. And especially now that I've seen Johnny Depp speak and articulate himself in public as part of these court proceedings, which is itself very unpleasant, I find him very reminiscent of an older Marlon Brando, you know, in his sense of humor, in his kind of charming crankiness and grumpiness, and just like a generally affable man, even though you can clearly sense that he's pretty rough around the edges and probably quite insufferable as an individual in his private life. But who fucking cares, right? He shouldn't have to go through this publicly. Jay says, weird, isn't 1979 16750? Well, I mean, No, I think it comes a little later than that. But anyway, again, this was we know this is a 1675 because again it has the provenance and it was just sold by Philips a couple of years ago. So J617 says he probably used a tattoo gun or switchblade. Badass mofo. Yeah, Marlon Brando was a special breed for sure. Also known to be quite insufferable and very difficult to work with, apparently. But hey, who isn't, right, at that level in Hollywood and among celebrities? Jake Brooks says, it's riveting testimony. This is Johnny Depp, but I can't take the court theatrics with AH on the stand. Stay away from crazy. Yeah, that's a good advice for all of us. Aussie Expat says, Depp has won his battle. He has resoundingly cleared his name regardless of the verdict and completely turned the tables on that. I agree. I agree. I still wish that he didn't have to even go through this trouble. But hey, I think in the eyes of the public, in the court of public opinion, I think he has won. Again, like you said, whatever comes out of that courtroom, regardless of the verdict, in the court of public opinion, he seems to have already won. Aussie Expat says the description of his performance in Superman are truly diva-like. All right, guys, we just completed 3 hours. I really appreciate your support and presence. You helped me a lot from the chat, with your comments, with your questions, with your interjections. If you haven't yet, please upvote. Please hit the like button. Every vote counts. It really helps. Spread the word, send out the link. I really appreciate it. And look, if you want to encourage me until I get to 1,000 subscribers, which is my first major goal, you can always consider a PayPal contribution at lordhellespontv@gmail.com, at lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App at $LHVVV, $LHVVV. It's really nice to see you all. Hopefully, I will see you tomorrow on Archie's stream. But after that stream, we're having a watch party for the big fight, for the Canelo Bivol fight for the WBA light heavyweight championship title. It's going to be great. Canelo, as you might know, always fights in the Cinco de Mayo weekend. It's a great attraction. It's a great fight. It's a super fight. We are trying to see if Canelo can conquer now a higher weight division after he has taken over 168 super middleweight. Now he's trying the same at 175. So we'll watch it together. We'll celebrate. We'll enjoy the show. Of course, no video or audio broadcast on my part, but I will be commenting on the fight play by play, as well as entertaining the panelists. And I hope you will jump on and won't only stay in the chat. Once again, if you haven't upvoted, please upvote. Please subscribe. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers. In the meantime, if you want to help me out, the options are there in the description and in the ticker that's passing now, PayPal, Cash App, or even just a nice email encouraging me for my efforts and for the work that I've been putting in is more than enough. If I can do a personalized video for you, send me an email. If you want me to dedicate a live stream for a topic of your choice, send me an email. If you want me to do a collection review for you we can arrange a time. Send me an email. We will do a live stream where we talk and where everyone gets to learn more about your watches, and through your watches about you, your life and your lifestyle. And I really love that. So I'm really looking for the next opportunity to do that. So send me an email at lordhellespont@gmail.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one. And Jake, J617, thank you. Fries with Mayo, thank you. Aussie Expat, thank you. Jake Brooks, thank you as well. You can send me maybe a photo with that email that's right down there, lordhellesportv@gmail.com. Show me at least that one piece, and maybe I can kick off tomorrow's stream with a conversation on that piece. All right, guys, I love you all. I will see you tomorrow in the next one on Archie's live stream and later on my stream for the fight party. Goodbye. Until soon.